Vuoripäiviin. Veostemi at uttesti vokna harlivet unnamauren. Istona imu Aidoneus A. Thank you all for gathering here today. I am Aidoneus A. As a Pitasami man whose earliest memories are interwoven with the stories from my grandfather about the whispers of wind across the tundra and soft footfalls of reindeer, I sit here before you not as an outsider commenting on them, but as a custodian speaking for us, the Sami people. Our living lands, our flowing waters, the yoiks and drums of our ancestors, and the hopes that we cradle for tomorrow. For millennia, we Sami have danced in harmony with the seasons, guiding reindeer to lichen-rich pastures in spring, listening to salmon bursting through the river in summer, wandering birch forests in autumn's gold, and tracing bright constellations beneath endless Arctic nights. And yet, as the world accelerates towards a green future, we find our homelands carved into grids of extraction. Wind turbines scratch the sky, mines gouge the earth, and plantations that replace forest tapestries and carbon offset schemes that treat living ecosystems as mere spreadsheets. In this time that we have together here today, in this moment, in this place, I invite you to journey with me from the pale dawn of the tundra to the corridors of corporate power, so that we may confront a harsh reality. The so-called green transition is too often a new frontier of the same old colonialism, one that threatens to extinguish the very foundations of indigenous life. But I also ask you to envision a different future, one built on the recognition of our sovereignty, the restoration of stolen lands, and the reweaving of human and ecological kinship. In our stories lie solutions that honor the rights of those who have stewarded these territories longer than any investor's timeline. Imagine the hush of dawn breaking over a white desert. Have you ever felt the stillness of a tundra at first light? Before the first pale fingers of sunlight brush the horizon, we awaken in our lavus, cradled by the earth and warmed by a humble fire at its center. In that morning quietness, even the snow seems to hold its breath. Beneath us, ancient lichen stores energy of previous summers, waiting to nourish our herds through the months of darkness. Overhead, the wind sculpts snow into sinuous dunes. Each breath of cold air tastes of resilience. Sapmi's landscapes are living partners in our identity, and protecting these lands is crucial to our broader call for indigenous sovereignty and ecological justice. Long before corporations arrived with megawatt promises, we tracked the herds by the faintest breaks in the snow. Read weather in the flight patterns of ptarmigan. We learned the geography by the shifting flow of the rivers. Our maps were oral. Our calendars were measured in migrations, berry ripeness, and salmon runs. Each element, earth, water, fire, animal, sky, told a chapter in an unbroken narrative of care. But step outside today, and the horizon blurs beneath steel towers. On Storia, 80 turbines puncture the skyline. On Rowan, 71 more. Their blades carve arcs of shadow across our winter pastures. Their low-frequency hum is a constant companion to the howl of the winds. Where our ancestors once heard only the land's heartbeat, we now hear a mechanical drone. And where reindeer once moved as one across vast expanses, our herds fracture, scattering toward quieter edges. In the stillness of dawn, what remains to remind us of who we were and who we still are? What happens when modern blades meet ancient pastures? My friend Terje is a herder of 63 winters. His face has been etched by decades beneath open skies. One frigid morning when I was in Norway, he turned to me with eyes that carried both grief, sorrow, and a fierce resolve. He said, "I still have my reindeer, but not the plains where I was born. My herds scatter along rocky coasts. They tremble at the shadow of each blade. What am I without the land that shaped me?" Terje's lament is more than personal grief. It speaks to a broader rupture. Reindeer herding is not a mere livelihood. It is a living archive, a moving testament to our people's ingenuity. When turbines fragment pasture lands, they do not merely displace animals, they threaten the intergenerational transmission of knowledge. The routes charted by heart, the signs read in snow, the songs sung beneath a moonlit sky. Each scattered herd tears a page from our collective memory. Moreover, the social fabric frays. Family members who once traveled together must split across distant grounds, sacrificing communal celebrations and shared labor. Young Sami watch their elders grieve, and they're confronted with a choice: pursue a future in distant cities or cling to traditions under siege. In both cases, the result is the same: the slow erosion of Sami culture. What are the trade-offs of so-called clean energy? Can our demand for power ever be truly boundless? Globally, we celebrate record developments and deployments of wind turbines, solar panels, and electric vehicles. But the data tells a sobering story. In 2024, global primary energy demand climbed by 2.2%. Now, that may not sound very high, but that is nearly double the previous decade's average. Rather than displacing fossil fuels, renewables have primarily met the world's appetite for energy growth. Our digital lives, streaming, AI, cryptocurrency mining, devour power. In homes from Oslo to Osaka, heat pumps replace oil furnaces. In cities from New York to Jakarta, EV chargers sprout up like mushrooms after the rain. Yet behind each clean megawatt lies an extractive chain. The heat of steel furnaces, acid baths leaching copper ores, open pit mines scarring mountains. To put this in everyday terms, the 150,000 tons of steel to generate 1 megawatt of electricity from a wind turbine is roughly equivalent to the weight of 11,000 average family cars for one turbine. Every solar module requires silicon, glass, and aluminum, materials processed in intensive smelters. The batteries that shift cars from gas to electric draw on lithium, nickel, and cobalt, mined in environments already strained by water scarcity, pollution, and conflict. Which brings us to a fundamental question. Is the green transition truly healing the planet, or simply redistributing harm onto communities least responsible for climate change? In October of 2021, Norway's Supreme Court delivered a landmark ruling. The Storia and Rowan wind farms violated Sami civil rights. The court found that the turbines had rendered vital pasture lands lost to reindeer herding cooperatives, stripping us of traditional means of subsistence. Yet despite a unanimous judicial affirmation, not a single blade was dismantled. Instead, the government offered monetary compensation and marginal pasture swaps, an attempt to transactionalize what is fundamentally a bond between people and place. In early of 2023, Sami activists put up a lavvu outside the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy in Norway, determined to remain until the human rights abuse ceased. For 700 days, this camp became a living monument to the gap between legal recognition and political action. Fires were lit under wintry skies, welcoming curious tourists and some pretty scornful officials. And activists recited the court verdicts by heart. But still, these turbines spin. This is green colonialism. When the veneer of progressive policy masks an extractive core, and when the language of sustainability is wielded to silence indigenous voices rather than amplify them. Let us flow with rivers and wander forests. How much do we lose when ecosystems fracture at the edges? Our relationship, the Sami relationship with water and forest, predates modern maps. On the banks of the Pita River, where my people are from, our nets once sagged under the wealth of salmon and Arctic char. In recent decades, warming waters and erratic ice breakups have halved our salmon runs. 2 summers of empty nets cost our community 5 million euros in tourism alone. But beyond that, when our nets come up bare, the stories of when to cast and how to mend risk fading forever. In forests that once yielded cloudberries, bilberries, mushrooms, wood, and medicinal herbs, clear-cut like logging now fragments lichen beds, critical to winter forage for our reindeer, and scars sacred groves. In Finland, reform finally mandated that companies consult herding cooperatives, granting modest buffer zones around migration paths. But across most of Sapmi, logging and extraction proceed under top-down licenses, with little regard for centuries of forest stewardship. What price do we pay for metals deemed essential to our wind-driven future? In the heart of Swedish Lapland, the city of Kiruna is undergoing one of the most dramatic urban relocations in history. A transformation that has been driven by an iron ore mine that is gradually swallowing the town from below. This mine has been operating since the late 19th century, and it now threatens to irrevocably alter the Sami traditional winter pastures. When they announced in 2022 the discovery of Europe's largest rare earth deposit near Kiruna, minerals and materials that are crucial for wind turbines and electric motors, EU leaders celebrated as a strategic win for continental supply. Yet for Sami herders, this deposit represents another fracture in a land already cleaved by rails, roads, and quarries. As the Swedish Sami parliament has warned, if we lose this ground, we lose the foundation of our entire culture. Meanwhile, the Galok iron mine near Jokkmokk, Sweden, has ignited a fierce struggle. Although Sweden's Truth Commission on Indigenous Rights recommended halting new mining license on unceded Sami territory, both national authorities and mining companies pressed on. Blockades, UN appeals, the conditional permits remain in force. Each blast, each drill echoes across our reindeer corridors, pushing herds into ever-narrowing margins and threatening the very viability of nomadic grazing practices. In this rush for green metals, the voice of traditional stewards are reduced to procedural checkboxes. In Sami cosmology, every feature of the landscape is imbued with spirit. Our mountains are the domus of Mataraka, our Mother Earth. Rivers and waterfalls are watched over by water spirits that guide the salmon's return. And ancient cairns mark places where our ancestors listened to the land's wisdom. Summer grazing grounds are living temples where we gather under the midnight sun to offer yoiks, our sacred songs of remembrance, honoring the bond between people and place and ensuring balance in the world. Yet Sweden's Markbygden mine, the Markbygden wind cluster, one of the world's largest onshore installations, now sprawls across 450 square kilometers of these hollowed sites. In Norway, proposals encroach upon spring pilgrimage routes, once followed by herders and Sami Nauti, performing rituals to bless the reindeer, call forth rains, and harmonize human action with the seasons. Turbines uproot more than pasture. They sever invisible ley lines that connect sacred stones, shrines to Mataraka, and seasonal gathering spots where knowledge transfers through story and song. Consultations, no matter how well intended, cannot replace the ceremonial consensus that indigenous governance requires. Herders describe how the turbine's mechanical roar drowns the low-frequency vibration of our yoiks that carry across our valleys. Stones, once used for divination, now bear the scars of construction traffic. Lichen-covered boulders, regarded as our living ancestors, are crushed or fenced off. When these currents of living power are disrupted, reindeer lose their spiritual waymarkers embedded in the earth, and herders lose the heart song that sustains their identity. The outcome is not only an ecological fracture, but a spiritual one. As Elder Ailu tells us, when the turbines spin, the voices of our ancestors grow faint, and the drumbeats of our souls lose tempo. To protect these migration routes is to defend a sacred geography, one in which land and spirit pulse as one. Only by honoring the depth of this connection can any development claim true sustainability. Does every electric mile lighten our carbon footprint or simply shift the burden elsewhere? Electric vehicles promise to decarbonize transport, but their batteries depend on minerals extracted from indigenous territories far from tidy sustainability narratives. In 2023, Tesla reported a net income of $14.9 billion, profit that was leveraged on lithium mined in Chile, where Aymara communities reported groundwater depletion of up to 80%, threatening both agricultural and sacred salt flat ecosystems. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, cobalt and copper sourced for Tesla batteries feed a conflict economy in which miners, some under the age of 18, work in hazardous tunnels with little protective gear. Beyond human rights, the extractive process fractures local governance. In Atacama, community assemblies once managed water collectively. Now, the decisions are dictated by mining concessions held by multinational corporations. In Katanga, mining pits scar riverbanks, leaching heavy metals into waterways relied upon by Pygmy and Bantu villages downstream. Every Tesla vehicle delivered to its new owner carries the weight of these social and environmental debts. When our devices connect us, what disconnections do we impose elsewhere? Apple closed 2024 with $96.9 billion in net income. Yet its supply chain draws from cobalt and lithium from the DRC's copper belt, where state-sanctioned security forces have violently evicted indigenous farmers to expand large-scale mines. In Western Australia, Apple's lithium suppliers operate on Aboriginal ancestral lands, where traditional custodians have faced legal battles simply to secure meaningful consultation. Rivian, though posting a $1.75 billion loss in 2023, plans to scale up vehicle production, with batteries requiring 14 kilograms of lithium, 100 kilograms of nickel, and 13 kilograms of cobalt per vehicle. In Indonesia, nickel mines have diverted rivers and increased sedimentation for communities of Dayak and Toraya peoples, undermining fish stocks and rice paddies. Lucid's $3 billion loss in 2024 and Proterra's $238 million loss in 2022 underline that the shift from e-mobility is capital intensive. But the social costs, invisible on balance sheets, fall on rural and indigenous communities. Cobalt sites in Idaho displace Shoshone and Bannock tribal lands. Copper mines in Papua New Guinea impinge on Motu Koita territories without appropriate benefit sharing. Are we trading one form of extraction for another? Vestas and Siemens market wind as sustainable. Yet each installed megawatt demands 150,000 tons of steel, mined in China and Australia, and rare earth elements sourced from Inner Mongolian's Bayan-Obo mines, where local Mongolian herders have witnessed dust storms that choke livestock and spoil their pasture lands. In North Dakota, NextEra Energy bulldozed ancestral burial mounds on Standing Rock Sioux land to build service roads. Despite active lawsuits under the National Historic and Preservation Act, the company pressed ahead, citing national decarbonization goals. The result has been the desecration of sacred sites, legal injunctions delayed by years, and a community's spiritual trust ripped away. And we arrive at carbon offsets. Financial instruments masquerading as conservation. Can life itself be reduced to a balance sheet? As Elder Amina recalls, they came with fences overnight, and by dawn, our cattle had nowhere to roam. Our way of life disappeared in a single night. This grounds these statistics in a lived loss. Around the globe, carbon offset programs have ballooned into a market valued over $300 billion, promising companies an easy path to net zero. But these schemes often commodify forests, treating living ecosystems as tradable units of carbon, while displacing the very stewards who have protected them for centuries. Under registries like Verra and the Gold Standard, vast tracts are enrolled not for conservation, but for monoculture plantations that promise high sequestration rates, but deliver ecological collapse. In Mexico's Sierra Juarez, agroforestry projects marketed as community-led were in fact controlled by outside investors. Indigenous families were forced to sign contracts that were written in Spanish only, granting exclusive land use rights for eucalyptus and pine monocultures. While these trees capture carbon quickly, they deplete groundwater, reducing biodiversity and undermine traditional polyculture that provides food, medicine, and habitat for hundreds of species. When fires broke out in 2022, the uniform plantations burned hotter and faster than the mixed forests ever did, releasing carbon that far outweighed the credits that were sold. In Kenya, Maasai pastoralists were invited to join a project that promised payment for avoided deforestation. Instead, fences appeared overnight, cutting migratory routes and forcing herders into crowded settlements. As these grazing lands shrank, conflicts over land and water intensified, and community health suffered from malnutrition and waterborne diseases. Despite the social upheaval, project developers proudly reported high retention of forest cover, earning credits sold to tech and finance companies in Silicon Valley. Even high-integrity offsets can fail. In the Amazon basin, a Verra project in Peru collapsed when satellite audits revealed that much of the forest was never at risk for clearing. Yet tens of thousands of credits had already been sold to multinational corporations for millions of dollars. The local indigenous groups saw no benefit and struggled to reclaim the governance over their lands after the terms of these contracts expired. The broader impacts are stark. True forests give way to carbon ranches. Biodiversity plummets. Water cycles are altered. Carbon offsets by design allow polluters to continue business as usual, shifting responsibility onto vulnerable communities. Meanwhile, the corporate balance sheets gleam with net zero badges. What would a just alternative look like? First, we have to recognize that forests are right-bearing territories, not carbon buckets. Second, benefits must flow directly to local communities with transparent governance, legal tenure security, and long-term stewardship funds. Third, offset registries must be restructured. No single species plantations, no fencing of commons, and full de facto free, prior, and informed consent before registration. If we can shift from commodification back to collaboration, valuing forests for all ecosystem services that they provide, from water filtration to cultural continuity, offsets could help fund genuine conservation rather than perpetuating green colonialism. Let us step into the world's greatest carbon sink. Who truly benefits when rainforest credits trade hands? Amazon.com has pledged net zero carbon by 2040 and invested hundreds of millions in Amazon basin offset programs. Yet in Brazil, the indigenous Munduruku and Kyopo territories have seen conservation NGOs register carbon concession titles overlapping with legally recognized indigenous reserves. As multinational carbon investors purchase conservation rights, local communities encounter restriction on hunting, fishing, and farming, rights guaranteed under Brazil's constitution. Financial flows rarely reach grassroots stewards. Instead, fees settle with project developers and certifiers. What hidden costs power our online lives? Google's global network of data centers, powering its search engine, YouTube, and AI, requires backup diesel generators and rare earth cooled transformers. Cobalt, nickel, dysprosium, sourced from mines in Indonesia and the Philippines, operating under minimal environmental regulation. The local Lumad communities report river acidification, forest clearance, and intimidation by company-backed security forces. In Papua New Guinea, nickel tailings have buried swaths of farmlands, prompting protests against VAL and BHP. Consider biomass's promise. Is burning trees to save the planet a paradox or our next pitfall? Microsoft's foray into biomass offsets has fueled a multi-million ton wood pellet industry that between 2010 and 2020 grew by over 500%, with the majority of pellets exported from the southeastern United States to European power plants. These pellets are marketed as carbon neutral on the assumption that regrown trees will absorb the emitted CO2. Yet, independent life cycle assessments reveal that burning wood pellets releases 1.2 times more CO2 per megawatt hour than coal over the first 20 years, which is the critical window for climate mitigation. In states like North Carolina and Virginia, pellet mills have converted hundreds of thousands of acres of mature hardwood forests, once the ancestral hunting, fishing, and gathering grounds for the Cherokee, Lumbee, and Seminole peoples, into tree farms of Lalobe pine grown for rapid harvest. This clearance not only destroys biodiversity, it undermines traditional practices such as basket weaving, resin collection, and wild food harvesting. Air quality studies near pellet plant operations show elevated particulate matters correlating with a 25% increase in respiratory hospitalizations among local children. And this is particularly alarming for Cherokee families, whose asthma rates already exceed the national average. The Lumbee resin harvesters report that there's dwindling pine resin yields as forests are fragmented and soil health declines. This erodes a culturally and economically important craft passed down through generations. And despite these impacts, Microsoft has purchased over 1 million metric tons of wood pellet credits since 2018. Communities have organized protests, filed public comments, and pursued legal challenges under the Clean Air Act and state environmental statutes. Efforts that have led to modest improvements in emission controls, but they have not halted the expansion of the pellet mills. This exposes a fundamental flaw in market-based climate strategies. Treating forests as disposable carbon accounts rather than living ecosystems and human territories. If we're to move beyond greenwashing our climate solutions, we must prioritize ecological integrity and the rights of indigenous and rural communities to free, prior, and informed consent. Oil companies like Chevron and BP pour billions into carbon capture and hydrogen pilots, but simultaneously expand upstream operations in the Amazon Yasuni National Park and Nigeria's Niger Delta. Both of these regions are home to indigenous peoples whose consent has neither been free nor informed. At green hydrogen sites in Alberta, blue hydrogen projects siphon water from Treaty 6 territories, while pipelines carve through metist harvesting grounds. Are we ready to measure success by justice rather than profit? We stand at a crossroads. The fight for climate justice cannot be abstracted into financial vehicles and stock prices. It must be rooted in the rights of those whose lives and livelihoods are inseparable from the earth. To that end, I propose 6 non-negotiable demands for corporations, investors, and policymakers alike. Supply chain transparency, full public disclosure of mineral origins, processing facilities, and transport routes verified by independent indigenous-led auditing bodies. Land back as justice. Return title and stewardship to those who have cared for these territories since time immemorial. Binding FPIC policies. Mandatory free prior and informed consent enshrined into national laws and corporate bylaws, with enforceable penalties for violations, including project suspension. Equitable benefit sharing, with the allocation of at least 30% of net revenues from green energy and extraction projects directly to indigenous communities to fund education, land stewardship, and cultural revitalization. Community-controlled restoration. Establishment of indigenous-led funds for ecosystem rehabilitation, replanting lichen beds, restoring salmon spawning streams, and rewilding decommissioned sites under traditional ecological knowledge. New metrics for progress. Measure our success by community health, cultural resilience, biodiversity, and intergenerational well-being, not by GDP or gigawatts. When indigenous sovereignty is our cornerstone, climate action becomes regenerative, healing landscapes and communities together. These principles are not mere ideals. They are practical prerequisites for a regenerative future. When indigenous sovereignty guides investment, when corporate accountability is measured by justice rather than profit alone, we can transform the green frontier from a vector of exploitation into a model of interdependence. Each of us, policymakers, investors, activists, citizens, play a part. Demand FPIC in laws and finance criteria. Champion land back in courts and legislators. Support indigenous-led projects. And shift your metrics. Count not only CO2 avoided, but stories of languages that have been revitalized, herds restored, and forests alive again. Thank you. And I hope that we can walk this path together. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Curious what you think of stakeholder capitalism as an idea and practical potential.
I don't actually know enough about it, but I'm curious to learn more from you.
Basic idea is enshrining into corporate charters that they're accountable, or that they must, in their decision making, include impacts on upstream and downstream in their supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Any other stakeholders, employees, communities affected, etc.
Yeah.
Replacing the shareholder obligation with the stakeholder obligation. I've seen a lot of good intentions corrupted by this mandate that
Right.
get corrupted straight to hell
Mm-hmm.
by that mandate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'll look more into that. Definitely. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Comments? Concerns? A joke?
Do you have a referenceable spot where we can find those 6 demands if we were to want to go to our local lawmakers and try and petition them?
They'll be on my website. Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. Oh, yes. Actually, hang on just a second. Natalia, are you able to help? I can't hear. Sorry, I'm deaf. She's going to translate for me.
You mentioned, I don't know if it's a blockade proper or just holding some space with the Wabu or the indigenous structures that maybe didn't work out after some time. Are there any current ones going on in the territories that we could follow along right now?
They are still going on. Yeah, that 700 days, it's still going. There was some legislation that just passed in Finland that renewed the Sami Parliament's existence, which was under threat. They were going to disband. So each of the Norway, Sweden, and Finland, the Sami all have our own parliaments, but we have no legal authority. We're just an advisory board. And so Finland was going to disband the Sami parliament, but they just voted to renew it and actually give it a little more legal authority than they had before. The blockades and things that are happening in Storia on Rowan and the Folsen wind turbines, they are still ongoing and a constant legal battle. And for some reason, even the government entities in Norway, even though their Supreme Court has ruled, they're not taking action. So because currently the fines that the companies receive for running it are less than they generate in revenue every day. So it's a small cost to them to just pay the fine. But meanwhile, we have thousands of reindeer that show up. They will not go past these wind turbines, and they die if we don't feed them. And so that's one of the challenges a lot of our elders are having right now is for our entire existence, these reindeer have sustained us. They have fed us, but now we have to feed them to keep them alive. So, yeah. But yes, there are active protests going on all over Sapmi. Yeah.
I've got an active R&D project on some new ecosystem restoration tech. I'm wondering, how should I reach out to indigenous experts to get their insights and make sure I don't invent something worse than useless?
Yeah, that can be I didn't mean to cut you off if you were. Yeah. That can be a big challenge. There's so many different indigenous groups out there that are trying to do all these things. There's not really a big umbrella piece. I can certainly get you some contacts with some that I'm aware of, if that would help you. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you. Ulu gitu.